It was a day like any other, or so I thought. My name was Pierre, and I was leading a quiet life with my wife, Marie, in our comfortable house on the outskirts of Paris. That day I was working from home, taking advantage of the quiet to finalize an important project. The sun was filtering through the curtains, creating a quiet atmosphere in our living room. I was immersed in my work, the regular sound of my fingers on the keyboard giving rhythm to the morning. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of a car stopping in front of the house. At first I didn't pay much attention, thinking it was probably a neighbor. But a few seconds later, the front door burst open, startling me. I jumped up, my heart pounding, to see what was going on. That's when I saw her. My mother-in-law, Françoise, was standing in the doorway, her face contorted with anger. Her eyes were shining and her breathing was agitated. I stood motionless, unable to understand what was causing her to be so furious. "Françoise, what's wrong?" I asked her, trying to remain calm despite the palpable tension that suddenly filled the room. She did not answer immediately. She took a few steps towards me, without taking her eyes off mine. When he finally spoke, his voice was as sharp as a razor. "Pierre," she spat, "I've had enough of your shenanigans. You've played with my daughter for too long." I blinked, dumbfounded. "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "Oh, don't play innocent," he cried, his voice rising an octave. "I've figured it all out. Your lies, your deceit. You don't deserve my daughter." I tried to interrupt her, to ask for explanations, but she wouldn't let me say a word. Instead, she gave me an ultimatum, and the words hit me like punches. "Get all your stuff out of this house and move out. From now on it will be ours. If you don't like it, sign the divorce papers." The shock stopped me in my tracks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother-in-law, who had always been difficult but never to this extent, was asking me to leave my own home? To divorce Marie? My mind was racing, trying to understand what could have triggered such an explosion. "Françoise, I don't understand. What makes you think I cheated on Marie? We are happy together. There must be some misunderstanding." But she would not hear of it. "A misunderstanding? Don't take me for a fool, Pierre. I've seen the messages, I've heard the rumors. You think you can cheat on my daughter and get away with it?" I shook my head, completely at a loss. "What messages? What rumors? I can assure you that I have never been unfaithful to Marie. I love her, you know that." But the more I tried to defend myself, the more enraged Françoise seemed. She paced the room, gesticulating violently. "Enough lies. You have 1 hour to pack your bags and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'll call the police." I stood there, unable to move, my mind desperately trying to make sense of this surreal situation. How could my life have changed so abruptly in the space of a few minutes? Where was Marie? Did she know what was going on? "What about Marie?" I finally asked. "Where is she? Has she said anything about this?" Françoise's face twisted into a contemptuous grimace. "Marie is with me now. She has finally opened her eyes to the man you really are. He never wants to see you again." These words hit me like a stab in the heart. Marie, my wife, the woman I loved more than anything else in the world, did I really believe that I had betrayed her? How could I believe it? I tried one last time to reason with Françoise. "Please let me talk to Marie. There has to be an explanation for all this. I haven't done anything wrong, I swear." But my mother-in-law was adamant. "You have nothing more to say to her. It's over, Pierre. Accept it and get out of here." I stood there, unable to understand how my life had shattered in the space of a few minutes. My mind was spinning in circles, desperately searching for an explanation, a solution, anything that could make sense of this absurd situation. As Françoise continued to stare at me with a mixture of rage and triumph, I felt a strange sense of calm come over me. It was not the calm of resignation, but rather the calm that precedes the storm. Something was not right about all this, and I was determined to find out what it was. At Françoise's shocking ultimatum, I remained motionless for what seemed like an eternity. The silence in the room was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. My mother-in-law was staring at me, eyes glittering, expecting an explosive reaction from me. But instead, I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs and calm the turmoil bubbling inside me. When I finally got ready to speak, my voice was calm, almost nonchalant. "All right," I said simply. This single word seemed to reverberate through the room like a clap of thunder. Francoise blinked, visibly surprised by my response. No doubt she had prepared herself for a confrontation, to scream, perhaps even to cry. But certainly not for this silent acceptance. "What do you mean, okay?" she asked, confusion momentarily replacing the anger on her face. "You're not going to fight, plead your case?" I shrugged slightly. "It looks like you've made up your mind, Francoise. If that's what you and Marie want, so be it. I'll go." My answer seemed to unsettle her even more. She opened her mouth, closed it again and opened it again, clearly searching for words. It was the first time I had seen my formidable mother-in-law run out of retorts. But, she stammered, "You can't accept it like this. Where is your love for Marie? Your willingness to fight for your marriage?" I looked her straight in the eye. "My love for Marie has never wavered, Francoise. But if she truly believes that I have betrayed her, if she wants me to leave, then I will respect her decision. I love her enough to want her to be happy, even if that means I have to step aside." Francoise looked increasingly uncomfortable. It was clear that she expected a completely different reaction from me. His initial confidence was beginning to crumble in the face of my apparent calm. You're bluffing," she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're trying to manipulate us, aren't you?" I shook my head slowly. "No, Francoise. I'm tired of fighting. If that's what you both want, then I'll comply." I headed for our bedroom. Francoise followed me, clearly confused by my behavior. I opened the closet and took out a suitcase. Methodically, I began to pack some clothes and personal effects. Francoise stood in the doorway, watching me with a mixture of distrust and disbelief. "What are you doing?" she asked me. "Packing, like you asked me to," I replied quietly, still carefully folding the shirts. But. She sounded increasingly agitated. "You can't just leave. You have to defend yourself, explain." I stopped for a moment and turned to her. "Explain what, Francoise? You said you had proof. That Marie didn't want to see me anymore. What else can I do?" My apparent calm seemed to frustrate her more and more. She entered the room with clenched fists. "What are you playing at, Pierre? You think your little act is going to convince us that Marie will beg you to stay if you pretend to be the victim?" I gently closed my suitcase. "I'm not playing games, Francoise. I'm simply respecting your decision and Marie's. Isn't that what you wanted?" She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She seemed completely overwhelmed by the turn of events. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the front door. Francoise followed me, still silent. When I reached the threshold, I turned to her. "Tell Marie I'm sorry if I hurt her in any way. I love her and want her to be happy. If she thinks happiness is possible without me, then I accept it." I left the house and headed for the car. I felt Francoise's gaze burning my back, but I didn't turn around. I opened the trunk, put the suitcase in and got into the car. When I turned on the ignition, I saw Francoise running out of the house. She seemed about to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I drove off and left her alone on the sidewalk, staring blankly. As I drove, my mind was spinning. Despite my apparent calm, I was gripped by a storm of emotions. Anger, confusion, and sadness battled within me. But above all there was one certainty: something was wrong with this story. I knew Marie. We had been married for 5 years and much longer together. We had had our ups and downs, like any couple, but our love had always been solid. The idea that she thought I had betrayed her, without even giving me a chance to explain, was out of character for the woman I loved. And then there was Francoise. Her anger, her accusation, everything seemed excessive, even for her. She had never been my biggest fan, it's true, but to show up at our house and kick me out. It wasn't like her. The more I thought about it, the more I became convinced that there was something else behind it all. Perhaps a misunderstanding? Or worse, a manipulation, but to what end? I drove around for a while not really knowing where I was going. Finally, I parked in a small park where Marie and I like to walk on weekends. I got out of the car and sat on a bench, trying to collect my thoughts. My calm reaction had unsettled Francoise. I expected her to fight, to scream, to plead my case. My apparent acceptance had caught her off guard. What if that was the key? What if, by refusing to play her game, I had inadvertently foiled a plan? I took my phone out of my pocket and hesitated. Should I call Marie? Should I send her a message? But if what Francoise had said was true, if Marie really didn't want to see me anymore, wouldn't I be making things worse? In the end, I decided to do nothing for the moment. I needed time to think, to try to understand what was really going on. And maybe Marie needed that time too. I sat there for what seemed like hours, watching people pass by, children playing, life going on normally around me while mine had just been turned upside down. The sun was starting to set when I finally decided to move. I went back to my car, but this time I had a purpose. I was going to see my best friend, Thomas. I needed to talk to someone, try to make sense of it all. And maybe Thomas, with his outside perspective, could help me make sense of it. As I drove to Thomas's house, I couldn't stop thinking about Marie. Where was she at that moment? What was she thinking? Did she really know what Francoise had done? And if so, why hadn't she tried to contact me? All these unanswered questions were swirling around in my head, but one thing was certain, I wasn't going to give up so easily. I loved Marie and I was willing to fight for our marriage. But to do that, I needed to understand what was really going on. And I was determined to find out the truth, whatever it took. The hours following my departure from the house passed like a fog. I had spent the afternoon at Thomas' house, telling him about the surreal events of the day. My friend had listened attentively, sharing my incomprehension of the situation. We had put forward several hypotheses, but none of them seemed to hold up. Emotionally exhausted, I ended up falling asleep on his couch. The shrill ringing of my phone startled me awake. I groped for it in the gloom and my heart skipped a beat when I saw Marie's name on the screen. Marie, I replied, my voice still sleepy but my mind suddenly alert. What I heard chilled my blood. Marie was screaming, her voice interrupted by hysterical sobs. Pierre, what's going on? There's a sold sign in front of our house. What does that mean? I sat up abruptly, now fully awake. What, a sold sign? Marie, calm down, what are you talking about? I'm in front of the house, she almost shouted. I was on my way to my parents' house and there's a huge for sale sign in our yard. Pierre, tell me it's not true. Tell me you haven't sold our house. My mind was spinning, a sold sign? How could that be? I hadn't done anything like that. And suddenly I remembered. Oh, my God. The surprise I had prepared myself for. It all made sense now, but in a way I never would have imagined. Marie, listen to me, I said, trying to remain calm despite my racing heart. I can explain everything to you. But first, I need you to calm down. Can you do that for me? I heard her gasp on the other end of the line. She was clearly trying to control herself. Okay, he finally said in a shaky voice. I hear you. Good, I said, taking a deep breath. Now, I want you to look at the front door. There should be a message. Can you read it to me? There was a moment of silence and then I heard footsteps. Yes, there's an envelope taped to the door, Marie said, in a confused voice. Open it and read what's inside, I asked quietly. I heard the sound of paper tearing and then silence. A silence that seemed to last an eternity. Marie, I called at last, concerned. Her voice, when she answered, was little more than a whisper. Honey, surprise. I've sold the house to fulfill our dream of going around the world. Call me when you read this. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in Mary's mind as she tried to make sense of it all. Peter, she finally said, in a voice mixed with confusion and disbelief, what does this mean? I took a deep breath. It was time to explain everything. Marie, remember all those conversations we had about our dream of giving up everything to travel? Seeing the world, having adventures. I've decided to make that dream come true. I sold the house a few weeks ago, with the idea of surprising you. But, stammered Marie, Why didn't you tell me? And my mother who told me you had left home? I don't understand anything anymore, Pierre. I sighed. It's a long story, honey. Your mother came home today, furious. She accused me of cheating on you and ordered me to leave. I thought it was a misunderstanding, so I decided to play along and try to find out what was going on. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost see Marie trying to take in all this information. Peter, she finally said, I need you to get over here. Right now. We need to talk face to face. Of course, I immediately replied. I'll be right there. I hung up, my heart pounding. As I hurried to gather my things, my mind raced. How could it have gotten so out of hand? How had my romantic surprise turned into chaos? I left Thomas a quick note to thank him and explain the situation, then hopped in the car. All the way to our house, now our old house, I couldn't stop replaying in my head the events of the past 24 hours. When I finally arrived, I saw Marie sitting on the steps, the envelope containing my message clutched to her chest. She looked up when I got out of the car and I was surprised by the multitude of emotions I could see on her face: confusion, relief, anger, love. I approached her slowly, unsure how she would react. Marie, I said softly. She stood up and, without a word, threw herself into my arms. I hugged her and felt tears well up in my eyes. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other as if our lives depended on it. Finally, Marie pulled away a little and her eyes sought mine. Pierre, she said, her voice trembling, I need you to explain everything to me. From the beginning. I nodded. Of course. But maybe we should go inside. We sat in the living room, on the couch where we had spent so many evenings talking about our dreams and plans. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. That's it, I began, taking a deep breath. Remember all those times we talked about giving up everything to travel? Seeing the world, going on adventures? Those conversations have stuck with me, Marie. I could see your eyes sparkle as you talked about all the places you wanted to see. And I realized that I wanted to give you that. I wanted to make this dream come true with you. Marie nodded, encouraging me to continue. So, a few weeks ago, I made a decision. I put the house on the market. The idea was to surprise you. I wanted to organize everything, sell the house, plan our itinerary, pack our bags. And then, when everything was ready, I wanted to unveil the surprise and we would set off on the adventure. I saw Marie's eyes widen in surprise. Oh, Pierre, she whispered. I know, it was crazy, I admitted. But I wanted so badly to see you happy. I wanted it to be a magical surprise, not everything. I gestured vaguely, embracing the chaos of the last 24 hours. Marie took my hand in hers. But what happened to my mother? Why did she think you were cheating on me? I shook my head, still confused. I'm not sure. She came in today, furious. She accused me of cheating on you, told me she had seen messages, heard rumors. He ordered me to leave the house. Marie frowned. Any messages? Rumors? What was he talking about? I have no idea, I answered truthfully. I was just as lost as you were. But I thought if I played along, if I left without making a fuss, maybe I could figure out what was really going on. Marie nodded slowly, taking in all that information. Suddenly, her eyes widened. My God, he said. I think I know what happened. I looked at her, puzzled. What? The mysterious calls, he said. The secret meetings. Pierre, my mother must have seen or heard something when you were planning your surprise. She must have thought you were cheating on me. Reality hit me like a punch. Of course it did. All those secret conversations with the realtor, the appointments to view potential homes, the calls to arrange the sale. Seen from the outside, without context, it might have looked like an affair. Oh, no, I groaned, cupping my head in my hands. What a waste. I wanted to surprise you and I ended up almost destroying our marriage. Marie put her hand on my cheek, forcing me to look at her. Pierre, she said softly, your intention was beautiful. It was crazy and impulsive, but it was for love. We'll fix it. I looked at her, feeling a mixture of relief and love come over me. Despite all the chaos, Marie was there, supportive and loving as always. What are we going to do now? I asked. The house is sold. Our lives are on hold. Marie smiled, with a gleam of excitement in her eyes. Well, since the house is sold, why not make that dream come true? Let's go on an adventure, Pierre. Let's see the world together. I looked at her, dumbfounded. Are you serious? She nodded, her smile widening. Of course. It may have been a crazy way to do it, but you're right. This is our dream. Let's make it come true. I felt a smile tugging at my lips, excitement beginning to replace the anxiety of the last few hours. Okay, I said, let's do it. Let's go on an adventure. Marie leaned toward me and kissed me softly. When she pulled away, her face became more serious. But first, we have to talk to my mother. We have to explain this whole situation to her. I shuddered a little at the thought, but I knew he was right. You're right. We owe you an explanation. As we prepared to confront Francoise and resolve this misunderstanding, I couldn't help but think how unpredictable life can be. What had started out as a romantic surprise had turned into total chaos, only to take us back to our original dream. And as I looked at Marie, whose eyes sparkled with excitement at the prospect of our future adventure, I knew that, despite all the challenges and misunderstandings, our love was stronger than ever. We were ready to face whatever life threw at us together. The truth behind the sale of our house was both simple and complex. It all started a few months ago, on a random afternoon. Marie and I were sitting on our terrace, enjoying a glass of wine after a long day at work. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, creating an almost magical atmosphere. You know, Marie had said, her eyes lost in the horizon, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to leave it all behind and go on an adventure. I smiled, recognizing a dream we had often talked about over the years. Where would we go? I asked, playing into his game. Everywhere, he replies, his eyes sparkling with excitement. We could start with Asia. See the sunrise at Angkor Wat, walk along the Great Wall of China, get lost in the busy streets of Tokyo. Then what? I encouraged her. Then South America. The ruins of Machu Picchu, the Amazon jungle, the beaches of Brazil. We spent the rest of the afternoon planning this imaginary trip, laughing and dreaming like teenagers. But that night, as we went to bed, I saw a glint of sadness in Marie's eyes. A gleam that said, if only. That night, lying in our bed, unable to sleep, I had made a decision. I was going to make that dream come true. I was going to give Marie the adventure she had always dreamed of. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of secret activities. I began by discreetly contacting several real estate agencies to appraise our house. I spent hours on the phone, speaking quietly so as not to arouse Marie's suspicions. I pretended to work overtime in the office to meet with potential buyers. Every time I had to lie to Marie about my activities, I felt a pang of guilt. But I reassured myself by thinking how happy she would be when I told her the surprise. The sale of the house had gone through faster than I expected. A young couple had immediately fallen in love with our cozy nest and made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I signed the papers in secret, my heart pounding with excitement at the thought of Marie's reaction. At the same time I was selling the house, I began planning our trip. I spent hours researching destinations, reading travel blogs and studying itineraries. I had opened a secret bank account into which to deposit the money from the sale, ready to fund our big adventure. I had even started packing in secret, discreetly buying travel gear and hiding it in the garage. Each new purchase, each secret preparation filled me with an almost childlike excitement. But what I had not foreseen was the effect all this secrecy would have on those around us, especially on Francoise, Marie's mother. Francoise had always been a protective woman, sometimes too protective. She loved her daughter fiercely and had never approved of our marriage, believing that Marie deserved something better. My secret actions had only fueled his mistrust. One day, when I thought I was alone at home, I received a call from the real estate agent to finalize some details of the sale. I was so engrossed in the conversation that I didn't hear Francoise come in. She had come to drop off a plate she had prepared for us, a custom she had adopted despite our protests. Yes, perfect, I told him over the phone. No, my wife doesn't know. It's a surprise. Yes, I know it's a big decision, but I'm sure she'll agree. I hang up with a smile, imagining Marie's reaction, when I hear a noise behind me. I turn around and see Francoise with a pale face and wild eyes. Before I could say anything, she had turned and was running away. I tried to catch her and explain, but she was already gone. The next few days were tense. Francoise was ostensibly avoiding me, and I could feel her accusing gaze every time we passed each other. I tried to talk to her, to explain, but she refused to listen to me. "I know what you do," she shouted at me one day. "You don't deserve my daughter. If you think I'm going to let you hurt her, you're wrong." I had wanted to protest, to explain, but how could I do that without revealing the surprise? So I kept silent, hoping that everything would be all right when the truth came out. But Francoise had no intention of waiting. She had begun to make comments to Marie, insinuations about my strange behavior, my secret calls, my inexplicable absences. Thank God, Marie trusted me. She dismissed her mother's concerns out of hand. "Mom, you're imagining things," I heard her say one day. "Pierre loves me. He would never hurt me." But I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, the worry growing. Each lie I had to tell to preserve the surprise weighed on me more and more. The situation came to a head the day Francoise showed up at the house in a fury. She must have overheard another one of my phone conversations, or maybe she had reached her limit. "Get all your stuff out of this house and move out. From now on, it belongs to us. If you don't like it, sign the divorce," he shouted at me. I kept my cool, knowing that getting angry would only make things worse. My okay had caught her off guard. She had expected me to object, to protest. My apparent acceptance had disconcerted her. When I left the house that day, I knew the time had come to reveal the truth. I had left the message on the door, hoping that Marie would find it before things got worse. Now, sitting in our living room, explaining everything to Marie, I realized how magnificent and at the same time terribly naive my plan had been. I had wanted to give her an extraordinary surprise, but I had underestimated the complications that all that secrecy could create. "Oh, Pierre," Marie said, her eyes glistening with tears. It was a crazy idea, but so romantic. I sighed, relieved that he understood. "I'm sorry I caused so much trouble. I just wanted to make you happy." Marie took my hand in hers. "You make me happy every day, Pierre. You didn't have to sell our house for that." I nodded, realizing the truth of his words. "I know. But now that it's done, what do we do?" Marie was quiet for a moment, then a smile slowly crept across her face. "Well, since the house is sold, why not make that dream come true? Let's go on an adventure, Pierre. Let's see the world together." I looked at her, dumbfounded. "Are you serious?" She nodded, her smile widening. "Of course. It may have been a crazy way to do it, but you're right. This is our dream. Let's make it come true." I felt a smile tug at my lips, excitement beginning to replace the anxiety of the past few days. "Okay," I said, "let's do it. Let's go on an adventure." As we began planning our trip, I couldn't help but think how unpredictable life can be. What had started out as a romantic surprise had turned into total chaos, only to take us back to our original dream. And as I looked at Marie, whose eyes sparkled with excitement at the prospect of our future adventure, I knew that, despite all the challenges and misunderstandings, our love was stronger than ever. We were ready to face whatever life had in store for us together. The day had finally arrived. Marie and I stood in front of our house, luggage at our feet, ready to embark on our great adventure. But before leaving, we had one last thing to do, to confront Francoise, Marie's mother. We decided to invite her to our house to explain the whole situation to her. The morning was cool and a light mist still enveloped the garden when Francoise's car pulled into the driveway. Marie squeezed my hand a little tighter and I smiled to reassure her. Francoise got out of the car with a distrustful air. Her eyes went from Marie to me and then to the luggage at our feet. She frowned, confused. "What's going on here?" he asked in a worried voice. Marie took a step forward. "Mom, please come in. We have a lot to tell you." We sat in the living room, in a tense atmosphere. Francoise sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, her eyes fixed on us. "Well," she said at last, breaking the heavy silence. Is someone going to explain to me what's going on? Marie took a deep breath and started talking. She explained everything from the beginning, our dream of traveling, my decision to sell the house secretly to surprise her, and the misunderstandings that had arisen. As she spoke, I watched Francois's face go through a whole range of emotions: confusion, surprise, disbelief, and finally understanding. When Marie finished, Francoise was silent for a long time. Then, to our surprise, she burst out laughing. A deep, almost hysterical laugh that seemed to come from deep inside him. "My God," she finally said, wiping away a tear with the corner of her eye. "What an incredible story. Pierre," she turned to me, "I have to admit I was completely wrong about you." I felt a great weight lifted off my shoulders. "I'm sorry I caused so much trouble, Francoise. I didn't mean to." He shook his head, a wry smile on his lips. "No, I'm the one who's sorry. I jumped to conclusions. I should have had more faith in you, in your love for my daughter." Marie took her mother's hand. "Mom, we understand. You wanted to protect me. But you have to understand that Pierre and I are a team. We make our decisions together." Francoise nodded, her eyes slightly misty. "I know, sweetheart. It's just, you're my little girl. I will always want to protect you. And we thank you for that," I say softly. "But you must also trust us." Francoise gave me a long look and then nodded. "You're right," she said. "I'll try, I promise." There was a comfortable silence, each of us taking in the intense emotions of the past few days. Francoise straightened up and looked at our luggage again. "So you're really going around the world?" she asked, with a note of concern in her voice. Marie smiled. "Yes, Mom. It's our dream and we've decided to make it come true." Francoise took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "It's okay," she finally said. "I guess I can't stop you. But promise me one thing." "What one thing?" we asked in chorus. "Promise me you'll be careful. And that you'll call me regularly to let me know how you're doing." We smiled in relief. "Of course, Mom," Marie said, leaning over to kiss her mother. "We promise." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. We finished packing our luggage into the car, Francoise helping us despite her protests at the amount of stuff we were carrying. "Are you sure you need all this stuff?" she asked us for the umpteenth time, as she helped us close the overflowing trunk. Marie laughed. "Mom, we're going away for a year. Yes, we need all that." At last it was time to leave. The three of us stood on the sidewalk, with a mixture of excitement and apprehension in the air. Francoise hugged us tightly, first Marie and then me. To my surprise, she hugged me some more. "Take care of each other," he murmured. "Always," I replied quietly. As we got into the car, I saw Francoise's eyes cloud over again. But this time she was smiling. A smile of pride and acceptance. We set off, waving one last time to Francoise, who remained on the sidewalk. As we turned the corner, I looked at Marie. Her eyes were shining with excitement, a big smile lit up her face. "We made it," he said, taking me by the hand. "We're really going on an adventure." I squeezed her hand, feeling my heart swell with love and anticipation. "Yes, my love. Our great adventure begins now." The first few days of our trip were a heady mix of excitement and adaptation. Our first stop was Bangkok, a city brimming with energy and contrasts. The bustling streets, the spicy scents, the golden temples amidst modern skyscrapers, everything was new and fascinating. We spent our days exploring, willingly losing ourselves in the narrow streets, tasting dishes whose names we could not pronounce, visiting ancient temples where time seemed to stand still. Each night we would return to our small hotel, exhausted but euphoric, our heads full of new experiences and newly created memories. One evening, sitting on the hotel terrace, enjoying a cold beer and watching the sun set over the city, Marie turned to me. "You know," she said to me, her eyes sparkling in the golden light of twilight, "I never imagined we'd do this one day." I smiled, taking his hand in mine. "You're sorry?" She shook her head vigorously. "Not for a second. It's so surreal. A few weeks ago we were in our daily routine, and now we're here, on the other side of the world, living our dream." I nodded, understanding perfectly how he felt. "I know. Sometimes I still pinch myself to make sure it's not a dream. Marie laughs and leans over to kiss me softly. If this is a dream, I never want to wake up. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. We crisscrossed Southeast Asia, awed by the beauty of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, fascinated by the history and culture of Vietnam, dazzled by the paradisiacal beaches of Thailand. Each new destination brought its own challenges and discoveries. We learned to navigate in countries where we didn't speak the language, to adapt to cultures radically different from our own, and to face the unexpected with grace and humor. There were difficult times, of course. Nights spent in crummy hotels, exhausting travel days, frustrating misunderstandings due to the language barrier. But each hardship only strengthened our bonds, reminding us why we had embarked on this journey in the first place. And then there were the moments of pure magic. The sunrise over the Taj Mahal, the first time we saw a wild elephant in Africa, the night we camped under the stars in the Sahara Desert. We keep these moments as precious treasures in our memory. Throughout the trip, we kept in touch with Francoise, as promised. Our weekly calls had become a ritual, a time when we would share our adventures and she would give us news from home. To our surprise, these conversations had become something we all looked forward to. One day, when we were in New Zealand, near the end of our trip, Francoise made a confession that touched us deeply. "You know," she said, her voice slightly distorted by the internet connection, "I have to admit that I was wrong about your trip." "What do you mean, Mom?" asked Marie. "Well, at first I thought it was crazy. Selling the house, quitting the job, going on an adventure. It seemed irresponsible and dangerous to me." I felt Marie tense beside me, but Francoise continued. "But now, listening to you talk about your experiences, seeing how much you've grown and changed, I get it. This trip was exactly what you needed. And I am proud of both of you for having the courage to follow your dream." I felt a lump in my throat with emotion. "Thank you, Francoise," I said softly. "It means a lot to us." Marie wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "Oh, Mom." Francoise laughed softly. "Don't get sentimental now. Enjoy your last few weeks of travel. And don't forget that you promised to come and see me as soon as you got back to France." The three of us laughed, the sound of our shared joy echoing across the thousands of miles that separated us. When we hung up the phone, Marie snuggled against me. Who would have thought that this trip would bring the three of us closer? I smiled and gave her a kiss on the top of her head. Life is full of surprises, my love. That's what makes adventure so exciting. And as we stood there, watching the sun set over the beautiful New Zealand landscape, I couldn't help but think about how much our lives had changed. What had started as a romantic surprise had turned into an adventure that had not only strengthened our love, but healed old wounds and created bonds stronger than we could have ever imagined. Our great adventure was coming to an end, but I knew it was only the beginning. For the greatest adventure of all was our life together, and it had only just begun.